Hello everybody, thank you for coming out tonight. I know it's hot, I appreciate you showing up. My name is Paul Rocky Dean, everybody calls me Rocky Dean. I live in Springdale, and I've been here for the last 6 years. I've been on the city council now for 4.5 years. I was asked to come and see what they're about, and I was voted in, and I sit on the planning commission as well. I've been to several of the AWC conferences, so getting into small government was something kind of interesting that I've never done before. So in 2018, we retired from the military after 26 years, and we found that we were attracted to the beautiful inland Northwest. So this is where we landed roots. For the last 4.5 years, like I said, I've been with the council, and I have a lot of good ideas, and I have a lot of new strategies of how to get stuff done. And I think a lot of it is going to be, it has to be bipartisan, and we have to start working together and stop complaining to each other about each other. So with that being said, I'm going to run for the 7th District, position 2, and I look forward to seeing you on vote day on the 6th, and I hope I can run your votes.
Okay, Hunter, you have 2 minutes.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Hunter Abel. I am running for 7th Legislative District, position number 2. It's an honor to be here in the Tonasket Gymnasium. Last time I was here, I was part of a Navy Reserve Honor Guard for a Navy veteran who passed away here in Tonasket, as I would take part in his funeral. So it's a pleasure for me to be back here. I'd like to talk a little bit about my background and some of the hats that I wear. So I come from the private sector, the military, and the ranch. And the key things that are important to know about me is that I am a Christian, I'm a father, I'm a military veteran, I'm a constitutionally conservative attorney, and I'm a family rancher. I'll talk about briefly each one of those. So I'm a Christian, I'm a believing Christian. It's not nominal or cultural with me. I was raised in a Christian home and made an adult profession of my faith a number of years ago. I'm a father. I've got 2 beautiful little girls, ages 9 and 11. They're huge reasons about why I am running. I want this district to be better for them as they go forward into young adulthood and into adulthood. I'm also a military veteran. I enlisted in the U.S. Navy 18 months after 9/11. I viewed that incident as my generation's Pearl Harbor, and I wanted to respond in uniform. And I've served 20 years, both officer and enlisted, active and reserve. I deployed to Iraq. 2007-2008, Guantanamo Bay 2014-2015. I'm currently commander of the United States Navy Reserve. I'm also a constitutionally conservative attorney, so I went to law school at Gonzaga. My family's been around this area a long time, 4 generations, so that's our local law school. That's where I wanted to go to school. And there I had the pleasure of studying about our U.S. Constitution and our Washington State Constitution. And I take both documents seriously. I hope to be able to talk to them about them a little bit this evening. And then lastly, we're a ranching family. We've got a 4th generation family ranch there in Michigan. It's very important to us. We call it Long Rifle Ranch, and hope to have the girls take it over one day. My name is Hunter Abel, and I hope to have your support. Thank you.
Okay, for Pat. Pat, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks. So Pat Bell, everybody, good to see you here. It's good to be back here in Tonasket. This is my dad's hometown. It's my grandma's hometown. 4 of my siblings were born in the hospital here. My aunt worked there forever until she retired. I was thinking about the last time I was here when Hunter said that. It was probably for my brother's wrestling meet here. But a little bit about me. So my family's been farming here in this district for over 100 years. Very proud of that. Started out of a Chesaw, and I see a fellow Chesawan here. But after that, my parents decided to chase their dream and start a small business, take over a family business, and so that moved us around the state a little bit. I'm back in Eastern Washington. I've been back for several years now. I help my dad on the family ranch. I'm kind of a quiet partner. I get fired several times a week on the ranch, I found, from dad. If anybody's ever worked for their father, you know what that's like. I am running to defend faith, family, and freedom. That's on my cards over there. Give you some more information. I could talk a little bit later about some of my endorsements, but I think the top issue for me, I know the top issue for me, is what I've been hearing from law enforcement. I think we've had, 7 murders in this county, maybe more since I was here last and talking to the sheriff. I was deeply troubled today on the way here to learn about a machete attack that took place in Colville. There There was a shootout, the facts are still coming out, but it sounds like it might have been somebody that we've known out here in the campaign trail, a former prosecutor running for judge. And so I think that's unconscionable. I think people that attack public servants, people that attack police or prosecutors are despicable, and frankly, I think we need tougher penalties for that. So I'm Pat Bell. I look forward to your questions tonight. I think that's the best part of these forums, and happy to be here. Thank you.
First question is for Rocky. So Governor Inslee was the first governor to lock down due to COVID. This is a question from the audience. COVID lockdowns failed in every way. Would you stand up against those above you or equal to you in elected positions and fight mandates?
I think what he was doing was what he thought was the right thing. I don't agree with what he did. I don't think big government needs to be involved in all aspects of our life. We need to have a smaller footprint with the government. I would stand up against him. I will not be coerced. So I believe that if you're ill, you need to take care of yourself in the way that you feel fit to do it, not by somebody mandating and dictating to you on how you're supposed to. So yes, I would stand up and push back against that.
Follow-up question to that real quick, Rocky, is how would you stand up?
How would I stand up
As a legislator?
As a legislator, well, obviously the bills are going to come down and wants to pass legislation to enforce that. So a vote for it, I would vote against it, and that's how I would push back against it. I mean, I don't know how else you would explain that. If you don't vote for it, you don't support it, then obviously you don't stand for it.
Pat? So, 2020, Governor Inslee was the first to lock down the United States regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. The question from the audience is, it failed in every way. Would you stand up against those who are above you or equal to you if elected, in elected positions and fight those mandates?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would absolutely oppose similar efforts to impose mandates on the American people, the residents of the 7th District. I think we saw the disastrous outcome of these efforts. It wrecked lives, it ruined careers for a lot of public servants, it decimated our state patrol force, and so the consequences have been really significant. There was a related question of how would you oppose it. You can certainly oppose it through your vote, but one of the most powerful things you can also do is engage in civil disobedience. That's something that is available to individuals if they so choose. That's something that I would absolutely oppose.
So, Pat, Governor Inslee was the first governor to lock down the COVID-19 pandemic. The question from the audience is, it failed in every way. Would you stand up against those above you or equal to you in elected positions and fight mandates?
Yep. So that's one of the reasons why I'm running, and I think it's a little bit of a contrast about what each of us was doing during COVID. I was on the team of Congresswoman Catherine Forrest Rogers, pushing back hard against the governor on those conference calls, asking him not to pick and choose winners and losers, which is what he did, keeping certain industries open, closing others. We were working with our state legislators at the time to try and encourage them to call for a special session, to immediately reform the governor's powers, to introduce a resolution essentially of non-approval. Now, I know some, moved during COVID and could do remote work, but I was an essential worker during COVID, so I wasn't at home for very long. I would say in the legislature, that's one of the reasons why I'm running. I was actually very disappointed that our legislators, including here in the 7th District, didn't stand up stronger. I think what happened to our kids in schools getting so behind was abysmal. I had a kindergartner who had to try and do kindergarten on a laptop. Remember when we were told screen time was bad? Well, not if that's the only way your kid can go to school for 4 hours. And that's what I was told. I mean, it was a dystopian joke, something like out of a book like 1984. So that really lit the fire under me, and that's one of the principal reasons I'm running. I don't think we've learned the lessons of that, and I think we need to do that. We need to go back and look. I'm also horrified that the state gave $340 million of federal COVID relief dollars to undocumented individuals.
So this question will start with Pat.
You mean Hunter?
Sorry, Hunter. Apologize. I'm legally blind. Right, so Hunter, the administrative law of the Washington State Administrative Code, does it fulfill legislature's 1988 intent to provide the public and the legislature with greater access to administrative decision-making, and why?
Yeah, this is, I believe the question was asked with the previous group. I'm going to try and dive into what I really think is the question here. It deals with the Administrative Procedure Act, which establishes the process by which a lot of Washington state agencies engage in administrative proceedings involving the public. And I think that a lot of this is related to, actually something we've heard about in the news lately. That's the relationship between the citizens and the agencies that sometimes seem to rule over us. We've heard about the context of Chevron deference at the federal level, where thankfully the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down this case, which stood for the proposition that federal agencies enjoy what they call Chevron deference when engaging in interpretation of federal legislation. Our Administrative Procedure Act here in Washington, in some places, encodes our state version of Chevron. Now, the state version of Chevron is in some places located in the Administrative Procedure Act, in other cases, it's in various examples of Washington state case law. So, to get to the nub of the question, I don't think it really does. I don't think it was the intent of the legislature to create this imbalance between the people and the agencies that exist here in Washington. And I believe that there is a role for legislators who are elected in this district to take on our state version of Chevron. That's something that I very much want to do.
The question is, administrative law in Washington Administrative Code, does it fulfill the legislature's 1988 intent to provide the public and the legislature with greater access to administrative decision-making, and why?
I don't know that I even have an answer for that because I'm not familiar with that at all. So I'm not going to stand up here and say I do know what that is, because I really do not have any idea of that one in particular. I've read into it at all.
Okay, the words, Pat.
So I think sometimes in these answers, it's pretty clear who's the lawyer and who's not. And my answer is no.
Why?
My answer is no, because that law was, the intent of that law was to try and make state law consistent with either other states or the federal law as it pertains to the Administrative Procedure Act. I think and some of this was Greek to me, what Hunter was saying, but the agencies have too much power. That legislative power to make law is supposed to rest with the legislature. The legislature time and time again has trouble getting information from agencies. And the state constitution is very clear. We don't cede our authority to the government. This is a government of the people, by the people. We don't cede our consent to them. They can only do things with our consent. So these unelected bureaucrats who run the agencies and tell us how to run our lives. You know who should be telling us how to run our lives? Us. I trust people and our families to make the best decisions for ourselves, not unelected, nameless, faceless bureaucrats in a cubicle somewhere in Olympia or in Washington, D.C.
Question to you, Ryan. Do you support the Growth Management Act, and why?
I do not support the Growth Management Act. Being on the town council in the small town I live in, it has no place for us. It should be in the small entities. Big government should be telling us how we should be, or what we should be doing as far as looking at where we're going into the future. So I think everything needs to be kept for the bigger urban areas. I think the GMA works great, but out in the rural areas, I don't think there's a place for it.
Follow up. What would you do then in the legislature?
I would reach across the aisle and start working with some of my friends and start having conversations on how we can come up with new programs that's going to better the areas that we're looking at. My main focus is rural areas. Because the GMA, like I said, it has no business in the small rural areas because it's detrimental. We don't have the money for it. And we don't have access to the funds because Olympia's not turning any money loose down below where we need.
Okay. Pat, let's go with Pat. Do you support the Growth Management Act, and why? And what would you do in the legislature?
So I do not support the Growth Management Act. It's an example of one-size-fits-all legislation that comes over from the west side, with the west side individuals trying to impose their vision on eastern Washington. I think we all know that if they had their choice in Washington would be just the zoo that they visit or the wildlife refuge that they visit when they go on vacation. And so I very much oppose it. And I view it through a property rights lens. You know, property rights is one of the drivers of our prosperity in this country historically. And it's a reason that people from overseas, if given the choice, would prefer to invest in the United States because of property rights and the sanctity of contract. And that those are protected in this country, but unfortunately the Growth Management Act all too often infringes on what we can do with our own property, and it's again another attempt by the government to tell us what we can do with our land.
Support the Growth Management Act, why, and what do you plan to do in the legislature about it?
No, I support the full repeal of the Growth Management Act, and short of that, radical reform of it. And I'm proud to be endorsed by our home builders and commercial builders because this is one of the biggest impediments to getting after the affordable housing problem that we have in all of our counties. The other problem I have with the Growth Management Act is it's a one-size-fits-all approach. And it's Seattle and King County, what works for them, Olympia thinks works best for us. Some of our counties aren't even rural, they're frontier. People heard that? Frontier counties, okay? And so now we have people telling us what we can and can't build on property that we own, whether a well can be shared on a property and multiple homes can be built. And so I think it's frustrating our attempts to get after the housing crisis that we're in. But at the same time, you see counties responding to it by doing things with conservation easements, or you see the state government come in here and buy up farmland and then turn it into animal habitat. And then they count that in different ways from county to county to county. So in the same way I don't support the GMA, I don't support foreign adversaries or the state government buying up farmland and trying to convert it to a different purpose.
So this will be feedback. So in Florida a few years ago, they signed a memorandum of understanding with Brazil recognizing the primates' human rights. In Connecticut, I mentioned earlier, a dog had an attorney in court. California state legislature passed a law recognizing the Klamath River as a spirit person. Here's my question to you. The Utah state legislature passed a personhood law this year prohibiting state and local governments from equating animals, nature, artificial intelligence, inanimate objects, etc. with human beings. Would you support a similar law or a constitutional amendment in Washington, and why?
Wow. I think that sounds like it has merit. I don't think animals have personhood rights. It sounds like a lawyer's dream, what you just described there. So I definitely don't support what you were saying some of the other states are doing. I would tell you, sorry Rocky, this is one area where we disagree. In a recent newspaper article, Rocky pointed out that he believes humans are infringing on animals' habitat, i.e. the wolves. You know, it's their land, not ours. And I completely disagree. I think, as a Christ follower, I think God gave us dominion over the land and all the animals within it. And so, to me, that's just backwards. That's upside down and backwards type thinking from the other states. And I'll take a look at Utah's proposal, and then I'll bring it to the people. I think that's the most important job people forget. It's not what I think, it's what you think. What do you want? I mean, we could take a poll here, and we could do it that way, but my best judgment, just hearing from how you described the question, is that something we ought to take a look at.
So Rocky, North Dakota and Idaho in 2022 and 2023 passed the personhood law. Utah passed the personhood law last year, basically stating that state and local governments could not equate animals, nature, artificial intelligence, inanimate objects, etc. with human beings. Would you support a similar law, constitutional amendment in Washington, and why?
I would not support that, because if I understand the question, inanimate objects, so does that mean if I knock over my lamp at the house, they can take me to court? It doesn't make any sense to me, so I would not support that, and I would push back against that as much as I could.
So the question is related to personhood is passed in 3 states. There are states that have passed laws, etc., recognizing animals, human rights, having attorneys in courts, spirit person, all kinds of things. Utah passed the personhood law this year, prohibiting state and local governments from equating animals, nature, artificial intelligence, and inanimate objects. human beings. Would you support a law or constitutional amendment, or both, and why?
Mark, I'm so glad you asked that question because I've been talking about this at a number of events that I have been doing. First of all, yes, I would absolutely support legislation because I take the Constitution seriously. I would very much want to see the language of the proposed constitutional amendment. But let me talk about this for a little bit. This is a five-alarm fire that people need to be aware of. This is part of an ongoing effort led by radical environmental leftists as part of something called the Rights of Nature Initiative to create personhood rights on either animals or inanimate objects or environmental characteristics, so mountain ranges, rivers, etc. It exists in some other countries. There have been other countries, some South America, that have written this into their constitution. There are some municipalities in the States that have taken similar efforts, again, to create legal rights for these inanimate objects. And here are my thoughts about this. One, it's a direct attack on the sanctity of personhood. You know, I believe that we're created in the image of God. There's something special and unique about mankind that merits protection. It's also an attempt, and we've seen this in the past, to worship the creation rather than the creator. This is something we've historically seen over the years. So this is not necessarily new, but it is a new legal regime. It's very dangerous. One thing I'll say, and I'll add to your list, there's a couple of municipalities here in the state of Washington that have done the same thing with regard to the orchids over on the west side. So it always starts with something small and cute. But this is a direct assault on our very legal regime that we've had for centuries with regard to personhood being for people.
So, Hunter, we'll start the next question with you. So the Attorney General and current Governor candidate Bob Ferguson has lobbied the legislature to create a domestic terrorist and violent extremism commission this year, and it failed. Would you support his efforts if he becomes governor to resurrect his initiative and why?
I would not. This is an ongoing effort by those on the left who disagree with the political views from, frankly, anyone who disagrees with them, and redefining it as hate speech or extremist speech or speech that in some way needs to be shut down in the public square. And we see this all too frequently with regard to religious expression. That's frequently the canary in the mine shaft on these issues. So it's the street preacher who's then accused of engaging in hate speech when he or she is speaking about what the Bible teaches. Right? So we see this all too often in efforts to weaponize the government against ordinary American citizens, and I would absolutely oppose it.
Rocky. So current Attorney General and is running as a candidate for governor Bob Ferguson lobbied the legislature this year to create a domestic terrorism and violent extremism commission. It failed. Would you support his efforts if he became governor to resurrect his initiative, and why?
No, I wouldn't support it because I don't think that you should go after any of the individuals that you're going to try and classify as terrorists. This is not what this country was founded on. I've seen what terrorists looks like. I've been deployed 7 times. I know what they are. There's nobody in this country that has that look of a terrorist that you can say, oh, we're going to go after you, or we're going to go to your house and do this. I don't agree with that, and I would push back as hard as I could on that.
So Pat, Attorney General, current and governor candidate Bob Ferguson lobbied the legislature this year to create a domestic terrorism and domestic violent extremism commission. It failed. Would you support his efforts if he became governor to resurrect his initiative, and why?
No, never, not today, not tomorrow, never. I think we would be classified as domestic terrorists based on what I know your activities are. And I think half of this room would be. If anybody's ever called into a school board meeting, which I was doing every week during COVID, remember the Department of Justice said we're all domestic terrorists, parents concerned about what was happening in our kids' classroom. And even now, I still face that when I speak up against my belief that men shouldn't compete in women's sports. You know, that's hate speech. I believe in free speech, I believe in individual freedom, and I think this tramples on it. I'll go a step further and say I am proud to be taking contributions from people right here in Eastern Washington and not Bob Ferguson's lawyers. Okay? And just bring that to your attention. Go to pdc.wa.gov and see who's gotten funding from some of his assistant attorney generals, not me. I also think that we've got big problems with this attorney general potentially becoming governor. I think people are going to want Inslee back, just like they wanted Gregoire back after Inslee got in there. And what is the root of it? They're both lawyers. I mean, they're both liberal lawyers. But I think you can see the threats that can come from people who maybe they're well-intentioned, but really aren't. I think the other problem we have is the woke liberal state bar association that's refusing to investigate Bob Ferguson until after the election for his own election interference when he ramrodded out the other Bob Fergusons from the election.
Rocky, this question goes to you. So a new law was added by initiative this year, it was alluded to before, Title 28A, Common School Provisions, Chapter 605, Parental Access. It states that the legislature recognizes parents as the primary stakeholder in their child's upbringing. If elected, would you support a new law or amending that law to state that the state's role is secondary and supportive to the parent's primary role?
No, I wouldn't support that because I think the parents are the primary caregivers and they're the decision makers for their children. We don't need people in the schools telling us what we can and can't do. It doesn't matter what the highest level of government comes down from. In the end, the Lord put our children on this planet for us to care for. And we are the caregivers of these children, just like my parents were my caregivers before they passed. So there's no place in school or any place for the government to have their hands when they're telling you how you have to raise your children, what you can and can't do to your children. But they always want to get in your business if you want to take a belt to your kid's butt. And that's not the way it's supposed to be done.
Pat, I'm sorry, Hunter. You guys are twins. So a new law, an initiative was passed this year, Title 28A, Common School Provisions, Chapter 605, Parental Access. It states that the legislature finds that the parents are the primary stakeholder in their child's upbringing. Would you support amending that law, adding a new law, a constitutional amendment that would declare legally that the state's role is secondary and supportive of the parent's primary role?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd be very interested in a constitutional amendment that goes and says that it is secondary to the state, to the parents' role. I have concerns about adding supportive. You know, the old line about if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk, or if you give someone an inch, you're going to take a mile. I'm concerned if you have supportive in there, then you're going to find things taking place under the guise of that language that would be absolutely horrid to the parents. So I would probably stop at secondary, probably period. Right there. Thank you.
So now to Pat. All right, good call, Hunter. So the new
I don't have a laptop from Pat.
So the new law was added by the initiative under Title 28A, Common School Provisions, Chapter 605, Parental Access. It states that the legislature finds that parents are the primary stakeholder in their child's upbringing. Would you support amending that law, adding a new law, or a constitutional amendment that declares legally the state's role is secondary and supportive of the parent's primary role?
So let me address it this way. I have been more encouraged this year than I almost have ever before by the people's initiatives, by the thousands of people that came together, gathered signatures, people in this room who got those initiatives qualified for the ballot. That was a big lift, but what it proved is right here in Eastern Washington, we have the signing power to force things onto the legislature's agenda. Now, this particular initiative, it's interesting that the legislature passed it because I think they're afraid of it, because they understand that parents are getting back involved. We are not just the primary stakeholders, but we are our children's primary educators. That is our job. And so when it comes to constitutional amendments, you brought that up a few times. I just want to be clear. I think the Constitution should be reread, not rewritten, both the state and the federal Constitution. So all these attempts to try and amend the Constitution, be careful about opening Pandora's box, because there's others who want to amend the state Constitution to enshrine more what they would call women's health care or abortion law than exists there today. But when it comes back to parents, yes, I do believe already, and so I wouldn't have a problem with enshrining that in state law, that parents are the primary stakeholder. And we have to build on this. This initiative has now given us the impetus for more legislation and can probably be defended in court as such.
Okay, Pat, this question goes to you. What is your opinion on our current way of voting regarding all mail-in ballots? Would you support picture ID for U.S. citizens only, registration, paper ballots, voting booths, etc.?
Yes.
Explain why.
So I think one of the most sacred responsibilities we have is to vote. I'm the grandson of 2 World War veterans who both lived here. In their generation, there were 2 brothers who didn't make it home. That's part of why I wear this hat, the Fallen Heroes Project, which I'm very active with. It's for Gold Star families. So when people tell me, oh, my vote doesn't matter, it's not important, I remind them of my uncle who took a .50 caliber shot, was killed for this country, and how important it is to me to vote. But I think we have to protect that. I think election integrity is paramount. People have to have trust and confidence in all the systems that we're talking about. I think the most basic thing is ID to vote. You know, there's a lot going on right now with motor-voter. People heard about that. You don't even have to be a citizen to get a driver's license, and then they register you to vote. I also think we need to end our state sanctuary state status. That has to go. That's going to be one of the first bills I introduce. I think people here who are here illegally should be deported. I stand with President Trump on that in lockstep. And I actually like President Trump's election reforms as well. I was proud to work with his appointees in my past role. And if I'm honored enough to be elected, and I believe President Trump will be elected, then I'll be working with him on all these issues. But elections are a state responsibility. We should never try to federalize our elections.
I have a follow-up question. This will be for everybody. So the state constitution specifies that you need to be a U.S. citizen, so that's federal law. And so if the state's not enforcing federal law, then how are you, as a legislator, going to deal with it?
Well, I think we see that time and time and time again where our state and governors try and pick and choose what they can enforce. And we've seen it with an attorney general who sued the Trump administration like 40 or 50 times. When they don't like something, they just sue. And so I think we have to strengthen protections for elections. I don't know, I didn't wake up yesterday, but when did we get to the system we're in? And why weren't people standing up before and bringing this attention to the people's attention to this issue? So it may take an initiative to get some of this stuff. I think that's the secret winning recipe here. We've got enough signing power in Eastern Washington to bring issues to the legislature's attention when they won't act. And so I'd very much like to see something on this floor that we're talking about with elections, because I think liberals and conservatives, I would hope, both would support election integrity.
You both will get the same amount of time for both. So the question from the audience is, what's your opinion on our current way of voting? All mail-in ballots? Would you support picture ID, U.S. citizen only, registration, paper ballots, and voting booth, etc.?
Well, it's interesting because I gotta go back to my military service. I've been in the military for 26 years. Most of my ballots were done mail. So by moving here and realizing that I got my ballots in mail today, to me that's the norm. So I don't really know, I don't really have an opinion on it. I think if you're gonna go to a place where you can vote, I do believe that you should have the appropriate ID. You should be able to verify who you are, and then you should be able to put your name and cast your ballot. Mail-in ballots, like I said, for the 26 years I've been in the military, and the 6 I've been here, that's really the only thing that I've known. So I can't really say if I would differ or not. I don't have a problem with them. I don't see that I went to what was it called? It was in Colville. They walked me through and showed me how the ballot process goes. And to me, as long as you got the people who are in there, their integrity is good, I don't think there's a problem with mail-in ballots, because when they're counted. So I don't have a problem with mail-in ballots at all.
The follow-up question is, the state constitution requires you to be a U.S. citizen, so if Washington State is not enforcing federal law with the voter ID thing, as a legislator, then how are you going to deal with that? The executive branch isn't enforcing it.
Well, I think if you're going to enforce it, you have to have some kind of a policy, for number one, which you have to figure figure out how you're gonna implement that. But if it is a federal law, then at the state level, it should also be carried out through the state authorities. And you need to have again, you gotta have the proper ID, the right documents that you need that the state requires. And if the federal government wants to get involved and they want to add something on top of that, then so be it. But if you're gonna vote, yes, I do believe you need to be a US citizen, period.
So Pat, question came from the audience is, what is your opinion on our current way of voting, all mail-in ballots? Would you support picture ID, US citizen only, registration, paper ballot, and voting booth, et cetera, and why?
Yes, I would certainly support ID requirements. I would also support a return to an election day as opposed to an election, 3-week period. My thoughts on this are more kind of like Rocky on my military experience. So when I deployed to Iraq, they were engaged in elections there in Iraq, and with coalition authority, one of the key building blocks of building people's belief in the integrity of the election was the requirement that they present ID. That was also the case in Afghanistan. And if the thought is that these are appropriate and necessary for elections in Iraq and Afghanistan, then I think we can take some lessons from that as far as ensuring our own election integrity. I think it's vital to present ID. I will say also, there was a question earlier about what kind of a form of government do we have. I believe that this was the previous panel, I believe that we're a constitutional republic, and that the Constitution is critically important to the governments of our society, and our elected representatives are critically important, and having confidence that those elected representatives were elected appropriately and in accordance with principles of election integrity, I think are really vitally important. There was a related question about, what do you do if the law is not being enforced? So one of the things that the legislature always has as part of its authority under our Washington State Constitution is the power of the purse, right? We can take down to zero certain aspects of the state budget that are out of compliance and effectively stop extra constitutional activity in that manner. There's also, of course, recourse to the courts.
So the follow-up question, which you sort of answered it, there is, the state constitution requires you to be a US citizen to register to vote in the state. If the executive branch is not enforcing federal law on US citizenship through the voter ID things, then how, as a legislature, then kind of alluded to something there, but what do you do?
Yeah, the officials who are not enforcing the law, their salary goes down to zero. That's the power of the purse with the legislature, is that you can take certain items and basically reduce it out of the budget. It's only the legislature that can allocate funds. And so that is one way that the legislature is able to carry out its constitutional role and ensure that the executive branch is executing its duties appropriately. There's also the oversight responsibility of the legislature. The legislature can hold investigations and hold hearings on the subject in order to ensure that the public is aware.
Okay, so Pat, this question goes to you. I got it right this time. So it's being reported that the Seattle Police Department is hiring non-citizens to enforce Washington state laws. Do you support the decision? Why?
No, I don't support non-citizens being hired, especially for those kind of key government law enforcement. I'm proud to be supported by 3 of our sheriffs. I think I mentioned that, the Washington Council of Police and Sheriffs, the Washington Fraternal Order of Police. I come from a military and law enforcement family. I do think we have a huge recruitment and retention problem, which is what this is getting to. I think we have a disrespect problem, and before people criticize law enforcement, they should go and try and pick up a badge and a gun and try and do the job. That's what I think about part of the problem. But I also think there are other states close to us, even this county, here in Okanagan, poaches from Hunter's home county of Ferry County, back and forth, back and forth. And so I think, once you put these incentives out there for different officers to get lateral officers, it does create a little bit of a disservice when they go and invest in a law enforcement officer and they can be immediately poached. So I think we have to be offering something more than a beautiful landscape and fresh air to get the kind of officers we need here. I think one thing I'm proud about Okanagan County is that there's a healthy respect for law enforcement here, and people feel it. It's the same way down in Douglas County. And I think if officers knew they were going someplace, they were going to have strong public support and strong funding for their training and operations, then I think we'd be able to attract more officers, in addition to competitive compensation.
Rocky, it's being reported that Seattle Police Department is hiring non-citizens to enforce Washington state laws. Do you support their decision and why?
No, I don't. Absolutely not. If you're gonna be in law enforcement, you need to be a citizenship. It's just like if you're gonna go into the military, you need to have the citizenship or show that you've got a green card and you can actually get your citizenship while you're in the military. I don't think there's a good vetting program, so if they're hiring non-citizens, we have no idea who we're gonna put on the streets that are supposedly there to protect us, or if they're coming from some other country from down south border and infiltrating the police department. That creates more headaches. I do not support that, I will not support that, and I wouldn't look at any bill that ever came across the table.
The Seattle Police Department is being reported they're hiring non-citizens to enforce Washington state laws. Do you support their decision and why?
I do not support that decision. A law enforcement official, it has unique powers and authorities within the community, but with the badge and with the gun comes the expectation that that individual is going to be bound by the laws of the state of Washington and bound by the laws of this country. So I do believe that law enforcement officials should be U.S. citizens. One thing I would say is I think this is directly related to the gutting of law enforcement that took place during COVID and the aftermath, where we lost so many good officers, men and women in blue, and we're still paying the penalty for that years later.
Okay. So Rocky, this goes to you. Is a 2-minute conclusion? Yeah. 2-minute conclusion.
First and foremost, I'd like to say thank you everybody for bringing the heat again and coming out and for inviting me to come here. It's nice to see you all and people I'm running against. I hope I can get your vote come August 6th. I go back to my military roots after 26 years in the military. At the end of it, I was running a motor pool of over 500 people. I've done numerous convoys. So when it comes to getting stuff done in Olympia, it's going to take a lot of logistics. You have to wear a lot of different hats because you have to support and you have to be in favor of a lot of different people. Put their needs above your own first. So with that, if you go to my website, rockygainfullwalk.com, you'll see my proposals for legislation I already have up there, and you'll see the rest of my platforms. I hope to see you on August 6th for the votes, and I hope I can hear everybody. Thank you.
Hunter, anybody this time?
All right, first of all, I'd like to thank Mark and Center for Self-Governance and putting this on, and I want to thank all you folks for coming out.